Hello there, I'm Randy Skretvet, and we are watching a wonderful film called Should Married Men Go Home, which was filmed Monday, March 11th through Wednesday, March 21st of 1928. Added scenes and retakes were filmed March 23rd, May 2nd, May 11th, and 12th, and it was released on September 8th of 1928. We have Edna Marion again, whom we saw prominently in From Soup to Nuts, and Edgar Kennedy is now a supporting actor, not a director. This is James Parrott's second film as a director with Laurel and Hardy, the first having been Their Purple Moment. He would ultimately direct 34 of the team's films, including the foreign language versions, through Twice Two, shot in December of 1932. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland on August 2nd, 1897, the younger brother of Charlie Chase, who was actually Charles Parrott. And he appears as an actor in about 145 films for Hal Roach, starring in 66 of them as Paul Parrott. Unfortunately, he suffered from epilepsy, and Hal Roach thought it would be better for his health to work behind the scenes. He directed several Charlie Chase shorts in 1924, then turned director for good in 1926, and ultimately directed about 90 films for Roach through 1935. We just had Stan walking on Motor Avenue near Palms Avenue. This was shot on Monday, March 12th, the first day of filming. And that tracking shot of Stan shows that there were plenty of vacant lots in the neighborhood. And now we're on the Hardy house is on a soundstage. That's on Tuesday, March 13th. And that's where they built the sets representing the home of Ollie and M. Hardy, which is possibly a tribute by Babe to his mother, whose name was Emily Norval Hardy. And of course, the Hardys do not want to spend their precious Sunday with anyone, especially that pesky Stan, and they're doing their best to pretend they're not home. This was reworked into the opening of a 1931 talkie short called Come Clean. Ollie's wife here is played by Kay DeLise, and she's Ollie's wife here and in Perfect Day, but she's also a party girl in Their Purple Moment and We Fall Down, as you will see in this collection. She appears in more than 70 films from 1924 through 1952. Her second film was a bit part in Chaplin's 1925 feature, The Gold Rush. Now you notice, at the beginning of this, you could see a lot of marks on that door, which indicates that Stan has either been here before or they did an earlier take than the one that we see. Anyway, 19 of Kay DeLise's films are for Hal Roach, 4 of them with Laurel and Hardy. She did 9 with Charlie Chase. And Stan is coming uninvited to the Hardy home. He's assuming that Ollie will want to go out and play golf. And when you see the note here, this is not Stan Laurel's handwriting. I don't know whose it is, but it's not Stan's. And just as you will see again in Come Clean, Ollie taking the note is a giveaway that he's home. And shoving the note back under the door is an even worse giveaway. Now, Hal Roach remembered that this story was devised by Leo McCarey and James Parrott. And before long, you're going to see a typical Leo McCarey touch here. Leo McCarey wanted to slow down the comedy for Laurel and Hardy because so much of silent comedy, even in 1927 and 1928, was fast, fast, fast. You know, they wanted everything to be very outlandish, visual gags, not a lot of time spent on characterization. Well, McCarey wanted to do the reverse of that. He wanted things to be much slower and based on personality rather than on outlandish gags. And even though McCarey didn't direct this, he was the supervising director, you're going to see a typical Leo McCarey touch here where Stan and Ollie and his wife sit and they will pretty much do absolutely nothing. And there are scenes like this in Early to Bed and Wrong Again and other Laurel and Hardy silents where just not very much happens. And I suppose the tension is palpable, and that's what the joke is. In fact, you're going to see a similar scene like this between Anita Garvin and Edgar Kennedy in A Pair of Tights, where Anita just stares at Edgar for the better part of a minute. Now, you're going to see in just a moment Stan with a cigar. And it's interesting because in 1933 in Sons of the Desert, he's terrified that his wife might find out that he'd smoked a cigarette. But in these early films, Stan is not quite the childlike innocent that he would become. And it's interesting that he has cigars in a surprising number of films. He's got them in Do Detectives Think, That's My Wife, Double Whoopee, Big Business, Their First Mistake, Scram, Busybodies, The Flying Deuces, and A Chump at Oxford. And those are the ones that I could remember from memory. Now, in just a moment, oh, there he's pulling the window shade off. He destroys a lot of this house in just about 3 minutes. They're going to mention The Maiden's Prayer, which was a popular piano piece written in 1856 by a Polish composer named Tekla Bardziuska. And 7 years after this film was made, the melody for Maiden's Prayer was turned into a Western swing standard by fiddler Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys. Also, notice on the Hardy fireplace this large ornate wooden model of a ship. This was carved by Robert Fennelly Slim Gragg, who worked at the Roach lot from 1926 until 1946 as a carpenter. And Jim Kirchhoff, who was a friend of Slim's, tells us, quote, Slim said he was asked by someone in the property department, knowing of his skill as a wood carver, to make it. Slim said everyone thought he did such a great job that he was commissioned on the side by a number of people on the Roach lot, mostly stars and directors considering what he had to charge, to make ship models for their homes. He was very proud that it turned into something of a fad throughout the Roach lot. Now, there's going to be a gag here that was actually scripted and shot for their purple moment, because there are stills showing the outcome of Mr. Hardy winding the spring of the phonograph. And the same outcome is in these stills for their purple moment, but that gag did not wind up in the final film. And you will remember in that film, at the beginning of it, Stan brings home a record of Asian music to his very unimpressed wife. Now, I've seen a lot of antique phonographs, and there is a wonderful group called the Antique Phonograph Society, which meets in Southern California, but I don't think any of them have encountered that kind of uncoiling spring. In any event, before long, M, or Kay DeLise, has had enough, and she's just going to order them to get the heck out of the house before Stan destroys everything. And Ollie reveals now that he, surprise, surprise, had golf togs under his robe, indicating that he was probably eager to go golfing, or at least anticipating that he was going to be going to the course. Now, in just a moment, you're going to see, oh, here, Stan has as much trouble with his cap as Anita Garvin had with her tiara in From Soup to Nuts. It's pretty much the same gag. And I guess, as with Anita's tiara, Stan knew just how to place that cap on his head so that he could give it a little nod and it would fall down. And now we have this gag where Stan is about to do a very agile Fairbanksian leap, and Ollie will feel obligated to duplicate it. Now, the walkway to the Hardy home right here was across the street from the Palms Elementary School at 3520 Motor Avenue, and that's still standing. But the studio built a picket fence for this gag, in which Stan does this agile one-handed leap, and Ollie only succeeds in smashing the fence to the ground. Now, coincidentally, on the day that this was made, the Our Gang films were also, the Our Gang kids were also shooting scenes on Motor Avenue for a film called Growing Pains, and that also included a very tall man named John Ossen in its cast, and you will see him at the very end of this film. Now we have Viola Richard and Edna Marion and Sam Lufkin. Edna and Viola are doing their very best to smile and look perky, even though they have both just been notified that their contracts with the Roach Studios are being terminated. I know that Edna had a 5-year contract, but she only lasted just under 1 year at the Roach Studio. And why they and Dorothy Coburn were all terminated at the same time, I don't know. But it's unfortunate because they added a lot to the Laurel and Hardy films for the 1 year that they were part of the Roach Company. Conversely, Edgar Kennedy had just been placed on a 5-year contract. Now here they are by this ice cream parlor. Now this cafe of the non-existent Vista Golf Club was actually a 3-walled set on the Roach Studios' front lawn facing Washington Boulevard. And the ivy-covered structure that you see in the background there, that's the front of the studio's administration building. Now, Richard W. Band tells us, quote, Hal Roach could have watched the sequence being filmed from his office on the east side of that colonial-looking building, unquote. And it's very interesting that this scene, which depends so much on dialogue, was even attempted in a silent film. And of course, Stan and Babe would repeat this routine much more successfully just over a year later in their talkie film Men o' War. And in that film, James Finlayson as the soda jerk becomes an integral part of the scene, whereas Charlie Hall is all but invisible in this silent version. You'll see him popping in on the right. There he is. There's Charlie Hall. Now, in later years, Stan Laurel expressed his irritation that Abbott and Costello had reworked this routine in their 1941 movie Keep 'em Flying. But it's possible that Stan didn't know or remember that the routine really was originated by the famous Dutch vaudeville comedians Joe Weber and Lou Fields, who recorded it as Drinking Scene for Columbia Records on March 14th, 1912. In case you wondered, it was Columbia record number A1159. Now, in the Weber and Fields version, they're trying to get a glass of beer for 5 cents, and Weber's supposed to say, "I don't care for it," but instead says, "I don't care if I do," and gets the beer intended for Fields. Now, in Laurel and Hardy's first version here, Stan is left with the check for 30 cents, not the expected 15, and he leaves his watch with the soda jerk. This does not have the great finish that you have in Men o' War, which is the one real true Laurel and Hardy moment in it, where Stan is expected to drink half of the drink and instead drinks all of it, and he explains that he did because, quote, "my half was on the bottom." Now, we don't have the nice thing in Men o' War where they go soda, soda, soda. So it's very interesting. They're doing a dialogue scene in a silent film, just as they will also do in Wrong Again. There's a lengthy dialogue scene in that film. And obviously they were anticipating the coming of talking films. Right around this time, Hal Roach had made negotiations with the Victor Talking Machine Company to first do scores and sound effects for the silent films, but he was also having sound equipment installed in the studio because other studios were starting to make films with sound, and Roach was always aware of current trends in the motion picture business and wanted to be ahead of things, and so he was going to have sound equipment installed in his studio. Now, you will notice there's a slot machine. You'll see that in some scenes here in the background. And I suspect that the original end of this scene had Stan taking his precious 15 cents and putting it on the slot machine, as he does in Men o' War, and winning a whole lot of money. And I think this is true especially because there is a still showing the boys outside this cafe with big boxes of candy for the girls, and you will see that in the photo gallery. So I think that was the original ending instead of just this fade out. Now we are going to go to the golf club, the golf course, I should say, and Stan is going to pick up what he thinks are just stray golf balls, not realizing that they should be left in play because other people need to know where they are. You will start seeing frustrated golfers in the background looking for their ball. Also, you can see a track in the fairway there left by the camera dolly as we have this tracking shot. Now, the Hal Roach Studio had an annual tournament, which was invariably won by Babe Hardy, and Stan was often too busy working on story preparation or editing to participate. He also was not that fond of golf. But on occasion, he would join Babe on the links, and I interviewed a friend of Babe's named Rodney Sprigg, and he remembered seeing them together at Babe's beloved Lakeside Country Club. And Rodney Sprigg said, quote, "Stan would show up at the club, he'd get out on the putting green, and he'd put on the doggonedest, funniest act you ever saw. He'd do more with that doggone golf ball, he'd just keep you in stitches, but I never saw him get out and play golf. The nearest Stan and Babe ever came to a quarrel would be when Stan would show up at the club, and he'd look at Babe and say something like, 'Well, I've been over at the studio doing your work.' I never knew two men who were more compatible." Rodney Sprigg, by the way, became the husband of actress June Marlowe, whom we remember as Miss Crabtree, the pretty teacher of the Our Gang Kids. And Hal Roach remembered that Leo McCarey came up with this idea after a round at the Lakeside Country Club, which counted Edgar Kennedy, the Our Gang director Bob McGowan, and of course Babe Hardy among its members. And Leo McCarey and James Parrott originally called their story Follow Through before Beanie Walker gave the film its title. Now, the Roach team could not have known that on January 9th, 1929, a musical called Follow Through would debut on Broadway and become a smash, giving us songs like Button Up Your Overcoat. Now, Mr. Kennedy has a terrible toupee here. By the way, there's an excellent biography of him by Bill Cassara called Edgar Kennedy, Master of the Slow Burn. Also, if it's only supposed to be foursomes today, where are Edgar's three partners? Well, anyway, on Thursday and Friday, March 15th and 16th, the company worked at the Fox Hills Golf Course. That's where this was shot, 4 miles south of the Roach Lot. And that is now the Westfield Shopping Mall. And after returning to the Roach studio on Saturday, then they once again filmed at this location on Monday, March 19th. And then they moved to a different golf course for the final 2 days of shooting. And by the way, if Stan wasn't able to get rid of a bothersome tooth and leave him laughing, maybe he should have had Edgar Kennedy take care of it. Also notice Stan's using a putter on the fairway. That's not really the right club for the fairway. There are other comedy films with golf in the theme. There's Larry Seaman's film Golf, and of course Larry Seaman introduced golf to Babe Hardy. There's Buster Keaton's Convict 13 and 7 Chances, Chaplin's How to Make Movies and The Idle Class, W.C. Fields' The Golf Specialist, The Dentist, and You're Telling Me, Charlie Chase's All Teed Up, and The Three Stooges' Three Little Beers, and Our Gang's Divot Diggers. Now, of course, Stan has the same problem with his cap that Anita Garvin had with her tiara in From Soup to Nuts. And he also has problems with his +4s coming undone. +4s are called that because they extend 4 inches below the knee, so they're 4 inches longer than traditional knickerbockers, and they were introduced to the United States by Edward, Prince of Wales, during his visit in 1924. Now, we're going to see some oil derricks here at one point, and there they are. This is the second golf course. And we haven't seen those before. And of course, Mr. Kennedy has chopped out a divot, which he gets confused with his toupee. But anyway, Hal Roach played golf, but he didn't play it well. But he did excel at polo, and one of his polo buddies was Eric L. Pedley, a champion polo player and socialite, and Mr. Pedley was on the board of a company called Fairways Incorporated, which had opened the Westwood Public Golf Course on November 11th in 1927. Evidently, Mr. Pedley was happy to let his friend Roach use this course for a lower fee than whatever Fox Hills was charging. Now, I've heard of sand traps in golf courses and water traps, and I guess when you mix a sand trap with a water trap, you get a mud trap, which is what Mr. Kennedy is valiantly attempting to contend with here. And you saw the Vista Club on the card. Well, that's consistent with the sign at the start of the film, although that's not really the name of the golf course where we are. And in just a moment, you'll see Dorothy Coburn. Now, having gotten paint on her backside in the second 100 years, and also a pie there in the Battle of the Century, now there she goes. Now she gets a splatter of mud on her derriere. Now, this is Dorothy Coburn's final film with Laurel and Hardy, and boy, can she take it. And she would continue in the film industry as a stunt woman. There's no surprise there. She grew up in Montana, and she was an experienced writer, and she appeared in westerns, such as the 1936 film Yellow Dust with Richard Dix. And later, Dorothy worked as Ginger Rogers' stand-in, as she died of emphysema in Los Angeles at 72 on May 15th, 1978. And boy, those girls can really take it. Now, the company came back to the Westwood Public Golf Course for retakes on March 23rd, and then they did further new scenes on May 11th and 12th. And that's because they always previewed these films and would reshoot sequences. And even though Laurel and Hardy had battled with hats and pies and rocks and trousers and more pies, this device had not worn out its welcome with audiences. And George Stevens recalled in 1970, he said, quote, "Throwing mud around is low comedy, but run this for an audience. Every preview we had on that one, audiences laughed. That was such a reward with those two guys, hearing audiences rock with laughter." Now, meanwhile, Laurel and Hardy are still spotless while everybody else is really getting plastered with mud. But that's not going to be the same the situation for much longer. And once again, we have this running gag of there's a right way and a wrong way, and then there's wrong way. And this was just part of being a comedian in slapstick comedies. You know, you were going to get muddy. I hope they had a shower there somewhere at this golf course, because goodness knows everybody in front of the camera needed one after shooting the sequence, and probably a few people behind the camera too, I would imagine. And once again, those oil derricks are there very prominently. You see them also at the end of Big Business. So there was a lot of oil being pumped in the area of Culver City back in 1928 and 29. And this mud trap, once again, is quite a hazard. And before long, we're going to see 7'2" Minneapolis-born John Aasen, Aasen, who is best remembered for his role as a giant in the film Why Worry with Harold Lloyd. There he is. And we don't get the full impact of his height just yet, but we will in a shot in just a moment. Boy, that mud puddle is almost as deep as the one that Laurel and Hardy were in Leave 'Em Laughing. And there he is. And he's in quite a few films going in through the late 1930s. You can read a lot more about him in Magic Behind the Movies. But now Stan and Babe have both gotten submerged into the mud. And having been in a mud bath with Laurel and Hardy and Leave 'Em Laughing, why, here's Edgar Kennedy again. And as he finds his golf ball, this is Randy Skretvet, and I thank you very, very much for listening.